Welcome to the Lady Luck Club. I am Lady Luck, and in today's video, we will be discussing the Lebanon Central Bank and how it became the world's biggest Ponzi scam. Now, if you're new to the channel, welcome. Also, please make sure to hit the like button. And if you're enjoying what we're doing here in the LLC, subscribe. Also, feel free to share this video with your friends. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter at LadyLuckClubLLC. Now let's begin. The economic collapse of Lebanon involves the collaboration between the Ministry of Finance, the Central Lebanon's bank, or the country's federal bank, and the commercial or private banks in Lebanon. This collapse is just more proof that Ponzi scams can destroy an entire country's economy. Well, it's the only thing I've been saying for months. This went on from 2000 to 2010, where the economy thrived on tourism and the financial services industry. Manufacturing was virtually non-existent, so most of the goods were 80% imports and then a roughly 20% export of goods. As manufacturing was virtually non-existent, most of the goods acquired in the country were due to 80% of imports, and they only exported 20% of goods, meaning they purchased more than they sold. This trade deficit of $15 billion a year was supplemented on foreign exchange money from wealthy investors as well as citizens that would acquire jobs abroad and send US dollars back to their family members that would use that money to open up accounts and to do business with the commercial and private banks. In 2011, the Syrian conflict created an influx of refugees into the country, but it also hindered the tourism and the foreign money investment flowing into the economy of Lebanon. In 2016, the World Bank decided to take a look into the finances for the Ministry of Finance as well as the Federal Bank in Lebanon and discovered that they had established a swap policy that was deemed to be a very convoluted Ponzi pyramid scam. What they discovered is that they were selling US dollar-based government bonds to their foreign and domestic investors, would use those US dollars to then swap out with Lebanese pounds in the central bank. And then the central bank would take the LBP at an exchange rate of 1,500 LBP to $1 and would offer money to the private and commercial banks through loans with a 15% return on investment. So they loaned US dollars from the commercial and private banks, and then the commercial and private banks would go out and recruit new investors and or depositors. Investors and depositors being terms used interchangeably in this situation. Because of that, the commercial and private banks began to run short on cash as the conflict became even more of an increasing hindrance in US dollar cash flow, greatly affecting many sectors within the government, as well as tourism. And because the central bank was printing more LBP, it was devaluing the actual LBP itself. It took more LBP to actually equate to $1 US. It also took more money for the country and its citizens to purchase goods. So, in a nutshell, how this comes full circle, the Ministry of Finance would sell these US dollar bonds to their investors, use that US dollar to convert over to LBP, which was decreasing in value and being printed by the central bank. And then the central bank would use that as collateral to get loans from the commercial and private banks. And then they would take those same US dollar cash from the private and commercial banks and pay back the investors that purchased the US bonds, but not the depositors or investors that created accounts with the commercial and private banks. And once the citizens learned that their LBP was decreasing in value, when they tried to go through some unofficial and unorthodox routes to convert money from LBP to US dollars, they started realizing that they weren't getting back as much in US dollars as they used to. However, the banking industry did not tell its investors or depositors that the LBP was losing its value. This created a crisis, and investors and depositors started demanding to get their money out of the banks. However, the banks started to either tack on astronomical fees that were just unreasonable, or they started freezing requests altogether. So now people were not even able to make withdrawals. People were not able to get their money out of the banks. And the government could not afford to actually reimburse all of the investors and depositors from the commercial and private banks, as well as those who had purchased U.S. government bonds. But for some reason, the government officials were not losing any U.S. dollars. Ultimately, the backlash really came when they did not handle the trading deficit and realized that by 2019, the trading deficit had climbed to $96 billion. So since this issue was never solved the right way, and because the central bank decided to borrow money from the commercial and private banks, but not tell its depositors that the LBP was decreasing in value, the economy crashed and collapsed. And that is what you're experiencing today. It's a country that's losing and collapsing the economy because the government failed to take action and to address real issues regarding trading deficits, and to be able to create reforms so that they can receive assistance. By 2019, the banks had put a ridiculous withdrawal limit on, or just downright froze, all commercial bank accounts. And the inflation currently stands at 246% as of April 2023. As a side note, there was an explosion of ammonium nitrate on a cargo ship in the port of Beirut in August 2020 that killed 200 people and left over 300,000 people homeless. And of course, there was still an influx of refugees still living in Lebanon from the Syrian conflict. This cargo ship has sat for 6 years, and because the owner was not able to pay the extra fee, it was not allowed to leave the port. This increased the strain financially on the country's economy. So by 2022, no one could withdraw their money, even if they had US dollars sitting in it. Some had a considerable amount. For example, on September 2022, a young lady went to the bank and with a toy gun robbed the bank of her personal money out of her account. Although she didn't take any money from anyone else, she still went in and demanded her money. The upside to that is that the supporters, the citizens, all cheered her on because they all were in the same situation. This young lady needed money to help her sister pay her medical expenses, as well as other citizens that were demanding their money to be given to them because they needed to live, they needed to pay bills. The government leaders sat and lived lavishly while their own citizens struggled and was unable to withdraw their money out of their own bank accounts. With the 246% inflation, that brings the current exchange rate to 15,000 Lebanese pounds per $1. So it would take 15,000 Lebanese pounds to get $1. If you wanted to see In the actual dollars, you would need 50,000 Lebanese pounds just to get to $3.34. And that's rounding up. The Lebanese banking system is, by definition and characteristics, a Ponzi scam. It just so happened to have become one of the world's largest banking Ponzi scams and caused the collapse of the Lebanese economic system. This is not something to overlook. It must be taken seriously because there are scammers that are doing the same exact thing with the same exact practices, not realizing or caring or taking into consideration the fact that they could be contributing towards their own nation's economic collapse. Just like Novatech, another dumb Ponzi scheme. They refuse to create reforms in Lebanon to get money from other countries, such as the U.S. pledging to send millions in aid, but they must create a financial reform in return. So, what is keeping them from creating the reform? Is it pride or incompetence or unwilling to admit their mistakes? Furthering the degradation of the economy by failing to create reforms so that they can get the aid needed for their citizens and to help re-stimulate their economy to remain a nation. It is beyond comprehension. Hopefully you guys all learned something today from this quick breakdown. I really hope that the citizens of Lebanon are able to get their money and that the government is swiftly handled and investigated and charged with embezzlement and many other crimes that may have been committed in this Ponzi scam. We have reached the end of the video, and I just want to thank you guys for watching, and I hope you learned something today. This is my first animated video, so I'm trying something a little new and trying to put out content that is informative, that people will hopefully not only listen to, but can enjoy aesthetically, but also spark conversations about how Ponzi scams have the ability to affect an entire economy in a nation. It's not just the individuals that are hurt, but it also just speaks to a greater, the level of damage that it can do on an economy and the nation's economy. That just shows how much power and influence Ponzi scams really have. Because once things collapse, then it's almost hard to correct. It's almost hard to get the trust and the understanding that you need from your citizens in order to reestablish your economy. The financial banking system in Lebanon is going to take years to be restored to a point where people are able to trust their banks. They're able to trust their money is safe and it's not being spent into a Ponzi scam. But for the time being, the best thing to do is do your research, do your homework, and make sure before you create an account or dive into any investment opportunities, especially cryptocurrency, please make sure you ask questions and do your due diligence. If it looks fishy, if it's too good to be true, more than likely, it's just not true. You guys make sure you take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and until the next video.